All right, welcome back to the First-Time Homebuyer Survival Series. This is part 19. We are still going over the offer process. So we spoke about our price and lowball offers. We talked about the deposit and why that's important. The next piece of the puzzle for your offer is the closing date. This is something that a lot of first-time buyers don't fully understand, so we're going to break it down. So there's a few key dates to the offer process. The first one is the offer date. That's just the date that you actually submitted the offer. There's the acceptance date. That's when everybody accepted the offer. That's usually a few days afterwards. You don't really have to worry too much about that. That's for your agent to worry about. The most important one is the closing date. That is when the home actually becomes yours. So that is when the title gets transferred from the seller to the buyer, and you get the keys, all the money gets transferred, and then everything is closed and everything is good to go. The closing date is when you officially own the home. Now, typical closing timelines in Ontario, most cases it's anywhere from 30 to 90 days after the offer is accepted. This is where a lot of people get confused, because when a lot of buyers start looking at homes, they think that they need to be ready to move and they shouldn't start looking at homes until they're ready to move. But that's not how it works. This process takes quite a bit of time. Let's say that you start looking at homes today. Well, it's probably going to take you at least a few weeks to find something that you like. And by the time you find one that you put an offer on that gets accepted, maybe that's another couple weeks. So that's already 30 to 60 days right there. And then you have your closing date, which is another 30 to 90 days. So it could be several months from when you start the process to buy a home to when you actually move in. So you don't want to wait until you need to move to start looking for a home. You ideally want to start that process as soon as possible, because it does take time. Another thing to keep in mind is that the closing date is negotiable. So you can pick the date that makes the most sense for you to actually be moving and actually to be getting. Ideally, you want to make that a little bit earlier. If you have to move on March 1st, then maybe you want to set your closing date for February 15th so that you have some wiggle room there. But the closing date is negotiable. It's not fixed, and this is where a smart strategy can come into play. One thing that you can do is you can use the closing date to strengthen your offer. If the closing date doesn't really matter to you, then this can be a powerful way to make your offer stand out, because sometimes sellers have preferred timelines. Maybe they want a quicker closing, maybe they want more time because they're buying another home. And if you can line up your closing date that you put in the offer with what the seller wants, it can make your deal stand out. It can sometimes be even more appealing than a higher price. Let's say there's a buyer out there who submits on the home. He's offered $10,000 more, but he's not flexible with his closing date. If you can put in your lower priced offer, but you can give the seller their ideal closing date, then you can get the home at a discount. Ideally, they would like to accept the higher offer and the better closing date, but sometimes it doesn't always work like that. And if they need to move at a particular time, then you can take advantage of that. The money matters, but also the convenience and the certainty matters as well. So being flexible with that closing date can help you quite a bit. Now, that being said, you still need to protect your own schedule. The closing date still has to work for you. You don't want to agree to a closing date that falls right when you're going to be away at your cousin's wedding for the week or something like that, or dealing with something important in your personal life. You want to double check that the closing date actually makes sense for you. So pull up your calendar, make sure there's nothing in there. When you have an offer accepted and it's firm, put the closing date in your calendar so you remember not to schedule anything around that. Now, when it comes to finding your seller's preferred closing date, oftentimes it's in the listing, and that's where your agent comes in as well. They'll usually have a conversation with the seller's agent. They'll figure out, okay, what are the ideal timelines that your client is looking to sell with. That's a conversation that your agent will have, so you can just lean on them for that. All right, so just to sum it up, the closing date, super simple. It's just when the home becomes yours. If you can be flexible with that, you can make your offer more competitive. All right, in the next video, we're going to be talking about conditions in your offer. They are arguably the most important aspect because they protect your best interests as the buyer. So stay tuned for that. If you want the PDF version of the guide, like I said in the previous videos, it is still down in the description. So go check that out if you're interested. All right, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.